Welcome to the Metal Pack Pod, the industry's leading podcast for the global metal packaging industry. The Metal Pack Pod is brought to you by the Metal Packager, the number one digital resource for the global metal packaging market. With over 7,000 monthly users in over 140 countries globally, be sure to check us out on metalpackager.com. I'm your host, Alex Fordham, and today we have a panel discussion with two very special guests. Joining the podcast is regular guest Mark Smyth. Mark established his company, Consultancy Solutions, in 2019, which is an independent packaging consultancy based in France, providing business, marketing and packaging intelligence to the packaging industry. Prior to Consultancy Solutions, his most recent position was with Ardagh Group as Business Development and Marketing Intelligence Director for metal and glass packaging. He is the recent author of Smithers Report on the Future of Metal Packaging and Coatings. Our other guest is Simon Jennings of Nomis Consultancy, where he supports the board and owners of a number of packaging and private equity businesses. Simon has had a varied career in the industry. Prior to 2010, for 16 years he was employed by Rexam, where he was responsible for over 50 acquisitions, disposals and joint ventures. Since then, he has been chairman of Pakistan Aluminium Beverage Company, chairman of GZI Industries and a non-executive director of Hulamin in South Africa. He has also worked as a key advisor to Hindustan Tinworks in India and China's Pacific Can. His latest project involves advising safety on an innovative resealable beverage can end, which we'll get onto a little bit later on. But before we begin the episode, we must give special mention to our sponsors, PPG. We're proud to partner with you and thank you for supporting the Metal Pack Pod this past year. Their range of innovative and sustainable solutions enables its customers to protect and beautify the world. Now let's begin today's show. Morning, Simon. Morning, Mark. Thanks very much for joining me. Looking forward to an interesting conversation about the pertinent topics within the industry. So, looking forward to a lively debate. First question really is, we've seen recently in the industry, I know we've had explosive growth, particularly in North America, and it's just interesting to see that there's been a couple of high-profile closures of ball plants in the US. So, as a result, has there been too much beverage can capacity added to the market, given the plant closures announced amid this capacity expansion? So where shall I start? Mark, would you like to kick us off?
Okay. Well, I think we have to see that beverage cans last year were imported at a rate of 12 billion. So depending how you define that, that's the equivalent of something like 15 lines, 12 lines, imported empty into the US. So the market is short by at least that amount, if not even more. And then so far this year, there's something like 4 billion have been imported. So we expect something like 5 billion to be imported this year. And probably it will balance next year. So it's not surprising that capacity is coming on stream. And when you install a lot of capacity, which is the case of the US, and put in large plants, then it may well be that some older plants, it makes sense to close them. And the case in point in Arizona, we saw 2 new plants go in and 1 very old plant. So a lot of capacity going into Phoenix, principally for Red Bull. And so it presumably makes sense to close the older plant, which was, according to me, more than 30 years old. So I wouldn't be too surprised about that. And of course, things can change in terms of timing, bringing in capacity. So no real surprise there. And I expect to see continued growth in the demand for beverage can. All the indicators are there.
Simon, I've been in the industry for a while now, but I still, compared to you guys, a relatively newbie, so to speak. I mean, is this an unusual development, or is this something that is quite commonplace with perhaps overcommitment to capacity and then can makers deciding to scale back to obviously mitigate other external factors and share prices and other issues such as I've just mentioned there?
I think it's quite a normal thing. I mean, there've obviously been quite a few new entrants into the US market, all bringing their plants online. Special growth in the time of the pandemic. So I think it's quite normal for Ball to rebalance their portfolio a little bit. As Mark said, the two lines that were closed down were old lines from ANC time, so ANC, Rexam, and Ball, so they were very old lines. And I think if you're going to rebalance your capacity, you will remove some of the old equipment. And again, I think something Mark at least talked about before was that the new lines are far more productive than the old lines, and so it's something that you would do. I mean, the market has slowed down this year. Pepsi, for instance, announced in their quarterly results this week that carbonated soft drinks demand was down. Again, there's that sort of normalizing post COVID, but the market is still quite buoyant. So I think in the longer term, this capacity's gone in and it will get fully utilised.
Mark, is this slight market correction slowdown, so to speak, is this something you're satisfied with? I know you're very much a stats figures man. Just interested to see your take on things and whether this is perhaps a natural development, seeing the explosive growth that we have seen due to a few of the issues that Simon there mentioned. Obviously, the ongoing sustainability message with consumers, which is resonating now globally. Obviously, we've got COVID to throw into the mix. So, is this just a natural slowdown as a result of I suppose the explosive growth couldn't continue in the beverage can sector, could it?
Well, I think the how I see it is you have a lot of capacity coming on stream at a given point in time, and it's not panned out. So we have significant capacity coming on stream. Is the market going to grow at a constant rate? Well, no, it's going to be up and down, and we see that. We see consumption of soft drinks, beer, energy drinks going up and down. If we look at monthly Nielsen statistics and that type of thing. And then we have a huge inflation effect. Usually for cans are relatively insulated from these effects in terms of can growth, but it may well have an effect. And so we see some of these plans moving back somewhat, but I see that as a temporary measure. We have a huge increase in capacity, not just in the States, but also in Europe, coming on stream at this point in time. And that's going to ease off. So that said, I still see there's something like 5% per annum growth for the next 5 years for beverage can, and it may move up and down. That's relative to the times that we're in. The other thing I'd add is just to give a bit of colour to what Simon was saying is when I started in 77, the beverage can line was about 900 cans a minute. Today, we're talking about 3,500 cans a minute. The process is essentially the same, but the energy use, the efficiency of the process is dramatically different. So we have very efficient lines coming in. Any one of these projects is going to take something like 1 to 2 years to execute. So it's when you look at it that way, it's quite natural that there may well be a sudden surge in capacity, which is exactly what we've seen because we have multiple projects that have come together at this point in time, and then that will ease off. So I don't see there's anything to be concerned about concerning the closures of old plants, and I see that the demand is there, and it's going to be there for some time to come.
Simon, it seems that Mark is relatively bullish about the situation within the industry at present. I mean, just interested on your take on things, particularly recently. I mean, you can't switch on the news without issues, cost of living crisis. I mean, inflation globally seems to be spiraling out of control. Is this a concern for the industry, particularly if you're looking at the end consumer, where people haven't got money in their pockets, and that naturally they're going to look to spend a little bit less, and perhaps the beverage can, and people scaling back on alcohol consumption and other things really. So I'll just be interested on your take on the sort of the external factors that we are seeing currently.
The external factors enough to drive anybody to drink anyway, but other than that, my view is can demand is relatively insensitive to the underlying economic conditions. I mean, the industry suffered quite severe inflation because of the increase in the price of aluminium last year. The price has come down a bit now. At least last week it was down at 2,300, which is a little bit above the average, but not the $3,000. So I think last year there was in the US the tightness of demand capacity balance, people having to import very expensive cans, people having to pay very high prices for the aluminium, and on top of that you then have high shipping costs again, which made the imports very expensive. I think the brands would have put their prices up to try and recover that situation. That may have had a negative impact on demand. Overall, I think inflation in the US is less than it is in Europe. The energy impact is not as great. So yes, the economy in the world is slowing down and demand will slow down, but I do believe it will come back.
Mark, in pre-recording, you had a slightly different take on the impact of prices of steel and aluminium. I'd just be interested to hear your take on things and whether this is still impacting on the industry, or as Simon says, that it's looking a little bit more of a prettier picture in regards to raw materials at the moment. Because I mean, a few months ago, I was hearing of can makers in the US having to import cans from Dubai, which sounded like a crazy situation due to the material shortages and other factors. So yeah, just your opinion on this matter before we move on to a couple of other topics, because we've got a busy schedule here this morning.
Good. Okay, well, I think the first thing is that, yes, material costs have increased, the can prices have increased quite significantly. There's some easing now, as Simon has said, in aluminium. And just looking this morning, in fact, at steel, so we also see some easing on steel. The prices for both of us are very high. But that said, if we look at the actual cost element of the container versus the price the consumer is paying, in fact, actually, it's very low relative to the price the consumer is paying. So the can is, in fact, incredibly efficient means to deliver the beverage to consumer. And there have been studies done showing total cost of ownership. The best package is the can as compared to plastic, even if we go all the way through the chain. So yes, the container price is high compared to what it has been, but then everything else is high. And we are living in a world that is, let's say, going around in a different direction in terms of cost and inflation. But the can is relatively insulated from this because it's a relatively small element of the cost the consumer is paying for the product. Inflation is affecting everything, the ingredients and all other materials that go into the final product. And then in terms of bringing in imports, if the can price is one in the market, then if you're importing from Saudi, as you said, Alex, or wherever it is in the world, it should be no surprise that the landed price of the can is maybe two, maybe double. So that has a huge impact when you're importing something like 12 billion, and the brands will have had to taken that into account in pricing in the market. So that's where we are.
Simon, any closing comments before we move on?
No, as I said, I'm still bullish about the market. I think US demand will recover, and the can makers will make good margins out of their cans.
Well, that's refreshing to hear. So, fingers crossed the industry carries on the momentum it's seen in the previous few years. I'd like to move on things a tad, talking with regards to digital printing, which is a hot topic within the industry. The recent Can Makers Summit a couple of weeks ago is very much a topic that was everyone was keen to discuss, and we've seen a range of exciting new developments within the digital printing sphere. So, Mark, first off, if you could just provide perhaps a brief outline of those developments that we've seen recently.
Okay, well, digital print is something that's has been nearly there for maybe 40 years in metal packaging. It's not such an easy technology to introduce in terms of direct digital to metal. However, what we've seen is several companies coming to the fore and bringing in systems which truly are in the market. So there are systems in place that are digitally printing beverage cans. The issue is that it's relatively slow. However, the market itself, if we look at beverage cans, then the minimum order quantity for a line running at, say, 3,500 cans a minute, 2,000 cans, or the range of speeds would be between 1,800 and 3,500 cans a minute. If you think about that, then the minimum order quantity needs to be something like 750,000, maybe even 1 million. You don't want to be running more than 5 labels a day on such a line. So what do you do? What does the market do where the demand is for 10,000, 20,000, 50,000, which is the craft area for both beer and soft drinks and other drinks? And so we see now filling lines that really are running at something like 100 cans a minute. This was not the case until about 5 years ago when it started. And so there is a market for short run, if you can do it. And today, the way that is done is by labeling and sleeving. Digitally printing the can is a more efficient means of delivering the graphic. It also is going to have an effect in terms of the extended producer responsibility taxes that are coming in, because the package will be seen when digitally printed as one package and not 2 sleeves separate in the waste. So there's several advantages. What we see is companies like Hinterkopf have got multiple systems running in the market, digitally printing. And these are successfully supplying printed containers in lot sizes that the craft sector want. We also have Suzo Slack with a similar system to Hinterkopf. Both systems run around 200 cans a minute. Suzo Slack's approach is to also provide a mini line, which is what they've done in Brazil. And this is interesting in that the overall investment is more efficient than trying to put such a system into a beverage can plant. And then we have ToneJet with not digital ink, but digital toner, which runs around 60 to 100 a minute. And they have 3 systems in the market. So we're right at the point, if we look at this from an evidence standpoint, that we have Hinterkopf, Suzo Slack, and ToneJet absolutely in the beverage can market. And then we have other systems for food and speciality, including aerosols. So we have Martinenghi for aerosols with the Michelangelo. And then we have Fujifilm with direct to metal sheet for paint and general line. And these are all systems that are in the market. So today, I'm really pleased to say that we have a number of systems from an evidence standpoint that are active in the market, delivering digital print. So this is I think, a turning point in the history of digital print and metal packaging.
What about, Mark, what about in terms of high volume? I know we say it frequently that can makers are ambivalent to change, fairly conservative in its approach. So a lot of the developments there that you're talking about are at fairly low speed. So do you see this as an inevitable aspect that eventually digital printing on a mass scale will take place within the industry, or do you think this is still consigned to fairly sort of short runs or to specialist sectors such as the craft sector and low volume?
I think the craft sector it's clear the craft sector and digital print is interesting, and it's addressing a demand in the market for short run that goes way below minimum order quantity, whether it's beverage can or food and general line. Can you have a high speed system? Well, there is a company called Velux who's working with Crown, who are working on a 500 can a minute for beverage can. I would say that for beverage can really to enter into the mass market, then you need to be somewhere around 900 or 1,000 cans a minute, which would mean multiple systems. So conceivably for Velux, that would be 2 systems. Conceivably for Hinterkopf and Suzhou Slack and others, that would be something like 3 systems. Whether you can compress that and get that in, that's all part of the development. But I think when you look at the economics of beverage can to enter the mass market, you need to be somewhere around 900 or 1,000 a minute and that's still with a premium. So there's quite some work to do to enter that mass market area. But for the short run craft, then there are multiple systems out there that really are working and have fantastic designs and are successful in the market.
Experience the iSense family of specialty coatings. PPG iSense Specialty Over Varnishes help beverage brands stand out on the shelf with unique effects. A tactile finish with a dynamic effect you can see and touch. A velvety, deep matte finish. A satiny smooth, medium gloss over varnish. A white base coat that makes colors pop. A bottle can and cup over varnish that enables special shapes. And a luxurious finish that shimmers and shines. Proven performance, possibilities. Learn more at www.packagingcoatings.com/iSense.
Simon, I recently visited Fujifilm in Broadstairs in the UK, and they remarked to me that the metal packaging can making industry is an industry that is truly ready to digitise. I mean, I know you've got a slightly different take on things, Simon, so I'd be interested to hear your views on that, particularly that statement.
Yeah, I mean, I think, that digital printing works on a can. I think it's clear, and as Mark said, there are various systems that you can use. At the moment, I think for the foreseeable future, this will be focused on the short runs, because if you actually look at the cost, the capital cost per unit is very high. I mean, some of these machines, you get, two or three, normal printers for the price of one digital printer, and it will produce 3 or 4 times as many cans. So you have this underlying issue of capital intensity and how that moves through into the market. Will the customers pay for it? Yes, in the niche markets, in the craft markets, very important, very fragmented. They are growing, and some craft beers are now becoming normal run rates. But will the customer pay for this? And I still look at the systems, wonderful products they make, but cost-wise, they seem to be out of the normal court for beverage cans. So there's that impact from my point. I think 5 years ago, the systems were pretty rudimentary. Now they're very complex, very good. They're beautiful print, but will somebody pay that much money for the print quality? At the moment, you can run multiple prints on standard machinery. It doesn't happen very often because the customer doesn't want to pay the upcharge. So I still think there's economically a long way to go for it to take off.
I'm not asking you to play clairvoyant, but if we perhaps look a little bit further ahead, would you be a little bit more confident in future years that this may be financially sustainable? Do you just think that the industry is maybe an interesting development, but perhaps we're not quite there on a mass scale? I know Mark mentioned Velox and Crown there, very much an interesting development, but is that something that where we think we're perhaps just a little bit way off, but if we're looking into the future, then this is still an exciting development?
I think there are two, you have to be clear about this. There are 2 markets, one of which is absolutely an opportunity. The craft sector today really has no option but to use digitally printed labels and digitally printed sleeves. And filling lines that are using these systems and delivering craft products are running at 60 or 100 a minute. So if you can deliver something that is direct to metal at that speed, there is a market there. Now, clearly that is not the same size as the mass market. The mass market is more than 400 billion cans a year just in beverage. Or to put that in numbers, is something like $40 billion US packaging value. And what we're talking about is a craft sector that is a few hundred million, maybe. So it's relatively small. But there is a need there, and that need is growing. It really is surprising. When you look at here in France, we did not have any craft beer at all. And today, when you go in the stores, you see a mass of craft beer, a mass of soft drinks that are craft products that have been introduced to the market. And they are in cans. They're in bottles as well, but they are in cans. And today they're currently labeled, so that there is an opportunity there for digital print. And at that end of the market, you can make it work. The economics do work, and people are able to achieve a payback. However, that same system will never, ever, as Simon rightly points out, work in the mass market. It's just not possible.
Unless, of course, somebody comes up with a technological breakthrough, which does happen from time to time. And hopefully there's somebody working on it now, but we don't know about it.
No.
But at the moment, Simon, do you think the mass market wants it as well? I mean, you've seen some of the large-scale fillers, your Coca-Colas have increasingly tried to look at the personalisation side of the market with like the Share a Coke campaign. AB InBev have done bits and pieces around, say, like the Super Bowl and doing sort of short campaigns. But do you think this is something where the mass market are comfortable with the situation at present and aren't necessarily, digital printing might not necessarily be a priority? And then, as Mark suggests, this is more just consigned to the craft sector and the small scale side of things.
I think every marketing director, every brand manager wants to personalize his marketing to his customer. It's been talked about for decades. It's happened in certain sectors. And, the big companies use these things for promotional activities. Whether they will ever be able to get them into the mainstream brands and be able to afford them, and, without the same price bracket, I have my doubts. If somebody comes up with a low-cost variable printing system, their hands will be bitten off by the marketing side of a business. But I think that's still to come.
Yeah, just want to move things on slightly, and another interesting technology development that we've seen in the past few years, and on a similar theme, I would suggest with the potential in the marketplace. I think, Simon, I'd like to kick off with you, and we want to discuss the resealable technology that we've seen within the industry recently, and if you could perhaps provide just a small update on the industry and with regards to resealable technology, and then also the brand that you're involved with, Safety, if you can just provide an update on what you guys are looking to develop as well.
Okay. I think we all agree that the beverage can is the best single serve pack there is for beers, soft drinks, and any other drink. It's unsurpassable on so many levels, from sustainability to cube efficiency, to the length of the product life. It just wipes everything off the face of the earth, basically. But there's a very large part of the market where people don't use a single serve, either because it's a storage container or a sipping container, and that accounts for a much larger part of the market than single serve. Resealing cans has been something that the industry and others around it have been looking at for years. There are products on the market. They are the standard ROPP products on bottle cans. There's the lug caps on can cap. There's the bowl resealable end on a standard can, recently EXO as well. But none of them have really taken off. partly, I think, because of cost reasons, complexity. So I believe there's a real market need there. And I think the sustainability discussions have actually increased that requirement over the recent years, because the go-to product was either a glass bottle or a plastic PET bottle with a screw cap on it. People are looking at developing brands that are low carbon, and you start looking and saying, well, a can is the ideal pack for that. So that's why I actually believe the opportunity for resealables is greater now than it ever has been. A resealable can is never going to be the cheapest product because it's a more complex manufacturing operation. You then come down to the sort of what do consumers really want? I mean, they want something that is resealable, not just reclosable. Having something that you close and is not, okay, it may not leak unless you shake it, or it may sort of stop some things going inside it. What people need is something that is truly resealable, because a PET bottle is truly resealable. A glass with an ROPP closure is truly resealable. I think that's one thing. You then say they want to minimize the amount of secondary materials, and there have been great efforts to try and make aluminium only resealable. I don't actually think it's physically possible to do that, because you need to have a sealant, and the sealant will always be made of a plasticized material. So that's where we are. I got involved with safety at the beginning of the pandemic because I saw a product that was resealable and easy to use. As with all developments, things always take a long time. We're now getting to the situation where we have worked through how to manufacture this in various run lengths at varying degrees of cost effectiveness. We are just about to do a trial with somebody, a small market test in a new market for beverage cans. I think that's really exciting. I've got a few quite large brands looking at the concept, and not in the sort of normal way of saying, okay, here's a can with an end in it, but here's a can that you could use maybe as a refillable, maybe as a refill container. So looking at different uses for the beverage can. So there is an opportunity there. I'm positive about the product I'm working on. We know it works. We know it's technically feasible. We know how to manufacture it. Breaking into a market is always difficult, and I'm hopeful that we will do.
Simon, have you been surprised about how slow can makers have been interested in this development, and perhaps that they could have been interested in the concepts of resealability perhaps a little bit quicker? I know you mentioned the plastic PET market and the demand from consumers for a resealable product. I mean, so I was just curious before I bring Mark in, really, that perhaps have you been surprised that there has been sort of not a lack of interest, but it's been slow on the uptake for these developments, and perhaps the industry should have taken this up quicker? And it's something that we mentioned earlier about the fact that can makers are slow to change and adapt. So has that been a bit of a stumbling block for you?
I mean, obviously, I've been working on this product the last couple of years, where can makers, I think, have just been struggling to get materials and build plants. And I think that was their number one priority. Everything else went out the window. Obviously, the can makers have been looking at this for many years, decades. So, yes, I think they are interested in this. I think they probably need a brand to come along and push it, rather than leading the market. But again, these things all depend on a brand pushing it. So, the priority has been making sure you can make the cans. I understand that. It's frustrating for me. I think they've also been trying to maybe look for the holy grail of an all aluminium solution, where actually maybe you need to develop the market and then invest in something that's got a lot of aluminium in it. The products that have come on the market in terms of I would say the can end products have not been easy to use. And that, I think, has put off some of the consumer goods companies. The resealable, the bottle cans, I mean, at the other end, in a way, they are, premium products, a bit like digital printing. They are very expensive, and you have to find the right market, the right brands to use that. And they are, as I said, there are plenty of bottle cans around in the market in Japan, and they've been widely used for many, many years. So I think, there is that other part of the market that the industry can hope to grow in and want to grow in. Has it been their top priority? And the answer is no. I think they've struggled in the recent years of just making enough cans to meet current demand for a single-use product.
Mark, so yeah, I've got a couple of questions for you, really. So is this an area of the industry that interests and excites you at the moment? And also, secondly, is it perhaps an area of us to just focus on the resealable technology just for the beverage can sector, and perhaps you can bring in some examples of resealable technology and also areas of interest in other sides of the market that you mentioned in pre-recording, baby formula and the paint cans market, for instance. So the two questions there to kick us off.
Yeah, okay. So I think it helps to look at the total beverage market. So by that, I mean still water, carbonated soft drinks, energy drinks, beer, hot drinks. Tend not to think about that. Hot tea, hot coffee, alcoholic drinks, so spirits, so milk. So literally list out everything that is a drink, and then make a map of where glass, plastic, and metal is. And what you will find is the core products for beverage can are soft drinks, beer, energy drinks, and then we have put everything else together as other, which would include tea and coffee. So as Simon mentioned, when if we think about Asia, we see bottle cans there, which is a resealable pack. There it's primarily used for coffee and tea. When you go there, lo and behold, you find that the drinks in the bottle can, which looks like a can and then it's got a top on it for people who are not that familiar with this. These bottles are different to what we have in Europe in that they're lightweight, resealable. They are a premium pack. The product is served hot in the winter. So you typically from vending machines or convenience stores, you get a hot drink. That's kind of cool and different. So that's one area. And we've got this map then that we've made by region, at least mentally made it. So we have coffee and tea in Asia. Then we have something really interesting that's happening in Europe and North America. And that is, to give an example, you've got Dasani in the States is putting water into beverage cans. You've got Evian putting water into beverage cans. So this was not there 5 years ago. So even if beverage can use in water is very small relative to the rest of the market, it is there. And the main package is PET. It's resealable. So if we're going to develop that market, and the brands are going to develop that market, the need for resealable has just become far more important than it was. So I think that's important thought to capture. So I see the need for resealable becoming more important. You're going to, if beverage can enters water, which is a huge market, there's a huge opportunity there. That's going to drive this. And then if we start to see in the UK and France, tea and coffee in cans. We don't see the hot ones, but we do see shelf-stable tea and coffee in cans. That's starting. So we have these different applications that are coming in where the ideal package really is resealable. And then at the strong alcohol end, we have brands looking for metal rather than glass or plastic for spirits and this type of thing. So the market is changing, and the volumes associated with these products are quite significant. So I agree with Simon. It's a very exciting development that Simon has got. There's a number of companies looking at resealable beverage ends. Very interesting area. And then then we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that there are other markets out there. So the one that is apparent and evident to everyone is infant formula. Go into any store in the world and you will see infant formula is, for the most part, in a metal container and is a resealable pack. So that is the standard. It was not always the case. It started off with a Tagger foil and a plastic overcap, and then today it's a peelable foil and an overcap, and then more recently we have Nestle with the deep draw end, which is a peelable foil which holds the scoop for the infant formula with an overcap, plastic overcap. And then more recently we have ByHeart with a peelable foil, deep draw end, holds the scoop and has a metal overcap. So, and this is certainly in the all export market to Asia, China being the biggest market. This is 100% in the metal container. So if we look at export business to China from Europe, Australia, New Zealand, other parts of the world, it's 100% metal going to Asia in a resealable package for infant formula. The resealable package is also used for other dry foods. So think of coffee, chocolate drinks, that type of thing. And then if we look at paints and coatings in general line, having a resealable paint container is far more convenient than the conventional lever lid. And there are systems there in the market, such as Ringo, which is open click and reclose. So there's a lot of activity in this area in different markets, and it does have a value proposition. So of course, which works. So infant formula is a very high value product, so it works there. Beverage is far more of a commodity product, so the costing and the level of package cost versus consumer price, that has to be a certain level, which is something that all the people developing this are working on. And it's only now with Safety and others that they're in the arena where it makes sense. And so I think that's going to develop. So that's how I see it. Don't forget that there's food and other markets. And then in the beverage market, then look at all markets, not just the core beverage markets. And I think that'll be the way forward.
What do you think the main barrier to this taking off on a mass scale is? It, as Simon suggested that previously, some of the resealable technology, particularly in beverage, has not quite cracked it and has been perhaps not been a great product in terms of resealable activity, or is it, as we've been saying before, in terms of digital print, etc.? It's some of the brands having the confidence to take this on. What do you see as the main barrier for this taking off on the mainstream?
Okay, well, I believe that it's cost. If you look at the cap can, which is it's successful in its own right, but it's not widely present in the market. So this is the beverage can with a top, which is a cap, a resealable cap. It's got a cone and it's got a cap, and it's never going to be produced at 12,000 ends a minute. A beverage end line will be running at 10 or 12,000 ends a minute. So maybe it's running at, 100, 200, something like that. So, and it's got more material in it. So the cost inevitably has to be a certain cost. And so then we see it applied for energy drinks and juice drinks, which are relatively high-priced items that can accommodate that type of closure. And I think that has been a problem. And it's only now that companies like Simon's with the Savati, and there are others like Real, have a package that in terms of material is very close to the beverage end and are absolutely scalable. So this becomes far more interesting and more feasible in order to enter a large scale drinks market. So I think that's really interesting.
And Simon, just for you to have the footnote here, is there anything else to add on this side of things?
I'd say that, as said, there's the opportunity there. I think, beverage cans can move into other markets. I think the opportunity is there now. It may not have been 5 years ago. I think, they are products that work, and, we need to promote them as an industry to expand the base of the industry. We need to grow the industry. It needs to keep growing. The underlying business, I think, is strong, but there's nothing wrong with growing it outside of its underlying business.
Absolutely, and that's a terrific closing statement. And it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for your time, and I'll speak to you both soon.
Thanks very much, Alex.
Thank you, Alex.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Thanks.
Thanks, Sam.